Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today. And thank you, GAIA, for organizing this. My name is Neydi Cruz. I'm the International Sustainability Associate Director for Healthcare Without Harm. I'm based in Mexico City. And by the way, quiero decirles a los colegas que nos escuchan desde América Latina, el Caribe y cualquier país hispanoparlante, que tienen
Spanish-speaking colleagues, you have the interpretation channel in the world sign. You can find the translation, Spanish or English if you wish.
And let me start by explaining a little bit about this session today and a topic which is very important for all of us in the world. This is a 1 hour conversation, hopefully not more than 1 hour and 5 minutes. We don't want to take much of your time. We will have Dr. Neil Tangri, who is the Science and Policy Director at GAIA, presenting the main findings of this report that's being launched today. And then we'll have a great conversation with amazing panelists joining us today. And we welcome everyone's comments, questions, and we will make a specific time for responding to these questions from the audience. So please go to the Q&A section here and make your comments and your questions to the panelists in this section. Please do not use the chat box for questions. And for all the people also joining from the Facebook, welcome. And you can put your comments in there. We will very much like to hear from you. Where are you listening to us today? Where are you from? Which city are you based on? And which is your expectations from today's meeting? So thank you very much once again. And why are we here today? Well, we want to talk about the urgency of the crisis, the need for affordable, easy, and solutions to be implemented that have fast results. Time is against all of us. We also need solutions that can, at the same time, help alleviate other interconnected societal pressure points like inequality, public health crisis, and rising cost of living. And this new report that today the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, GAIA, is providing a clearest and most comprehensive evidence to date of how zero waste is critical to the climate fight, while building resilience, creating jobs, and promoting thriving local economies. Thank you for the video in the beginning. Let me introduce our speakers before we jump in. We have with us U.S. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. She is from the Michigan 13th District. We also have State Representative Abraham Aiyash. He is from the Michigan House of Representatives in the 4th District. With us is here today Judith Enck. She is founder and president of Beyond Plastics and former regional administrator at the US EPA. With us today, Bom dia, Victor Argentino de Vieira. He is a zero waste consultant at Polis Institute from Brazil. And last but not least, Dr. Neil Tangri, Science and Policy Director at GAIA. Neil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen with you. I want to talk about our report, but first I just want to make a few remarks about my organization, GAIA. We're a global alliance, as the name says, more than 800 grassroots groups and NGOs in 92 countries. And our members all work towards zero waste and often combine this work with other related programs such as environmental justice, agroecology, waste picker support, and more. So you're all here to hear about the new report, and I'm very excited to talk about it. Zero waste to zero emissions, how reducing waste is a climate game changer. So as you know, every aspect of our work touches on climate, and this report really aims to bring all those different strands together. We hope it's a useful resource for decision makers, like the representatives on the call today, and policymakers, and for our members to use locally and nationally, really all around the world. It is a global report. So for those of you who want the punchline right up front, here it is. Zero waste strategies can reduce emissions by an average of 84% by 2030. This is what our calculations in this report show. That is 1.4 billion with a B tons of carbon dioxide and equivalent. It's the equivalent of taking 300 million cars, in other words, all the cars in the US off the road. So how does zero waste do that? One way, the primary way, is by reducing emissions from waste. Methane is the most important element in this puzzle. Methane traps 82 times as much heat as carbon dioxide, but it only lasts an average of 12 years in the atmosphere. So what that means is that reducing methane emissions is the fastest way to put the brakes on global warming. Waste methane comes from organics, which is mostly food waste, that have been landfilled. So keeping food waste out of landfills is like the most important thing that we can do to reduce methane emissions and reduce global warming. And our secret weapon for that is humble composting. Composting dramatically reduces methane emissions. But this is only the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. Recycling and upstream source reduction are also core strategies in zero waste. And these reduce emissions in other sectors outside the waste sector, the manufacturing sector, agriculture, mining, transportation. Basically, when we recycle or when we do source reduction, we use fewer materials, we are triggering emissions reductions throughout the economy. So what that means is that high levels of source reduction and recycling, when coupled with composting, mean that zero waste as an entire strategy can actually deliver more emissions reductions than the emissions in the waste sector alone. And that's what makes this so exciting. This is a potentially net negative sector. So let me tell you a little bit about the report. It is organized into 3 sections because zero waste does more than reduce emissions. It also delivers adaptation benefits and additional co-benefits, societal benefits. I'm going to touch really briefly on each of these. It's a pretty meaty report, and I encourage you all to really go through it. There's a lot more than I have time to go through, so I'm just going to hit the highlights here. We built the report around analyses of 8 very different cities around the world. And we chose these cities to represent a whole range of different circumstances, right? Different degrees of affluence and poverty, different climates, different regions of the world, and very different waste management systems. And our thinking is that if we can see zero waste working in all of these cities, it can work anywhere. It's really that adaptable of a strategy. So we leveraged our relationships. This is the advantage of working in a network with member organizations in each of these cities. Our partners were absolutely critical in sourcing and ground truthing local data from each of these cities. And they also elaborated these zero waste plans that are realistic to achieve in the next 8 years because our modeling exercise is for 2030. We fed that data into a greenhouse gas calculator model to see what the emissions impact of zero waste would be. So as I said earlier, the first takeaway is that composting is an absolute game changer. Keeping organic waste out of landfills is critical. The best way to do this is to implement source separation of organic waste, and then the organics can be composted. Sometimes there's other strategies that you can get beneficial use, but composting is certainly the lowest hanging fruit. And even moderate success with this strategy delivers really transformative results, like a 62% reduction in landfill gas emissions. That's not a pie in the sky. That's a very realistic, short-term, relatively easy to achieve figure based on successes that we've already seen in other cities around the world. So composting is absolutely critical. And then, as I said earlier, when that is combined with high levels of recycling, emissions reductions can go as much as 105%. Of course, that's what you're asking, well, how can it be 105% emissions reduction? The answer is that much of those emissions reductions are happening in other sectors. So you are actually reducing emissions more than the waste sector creates emissions. Another interesting takeaway is that energy recovery is not a particularly effective mitigation strategy. Landfill gas systems are leaky. They allow a lot of methane to escape. Incineration is itself a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. Of the kind of waste to energy technologies, really only anaerobic digestion works out positively, but that's primarily because it's avoiding landfill methane emissions. So thinking about waste as an energy source is actually not a particularly good way to go. I want to highlight Detroit here because we're lucky enough to have two great representatives from the Detroit area. Detroit is the city we chose in the US to study, and it's a great example of the transformational power of zero waste. I'm going to let our representatives tell you more about what's happened in Detroit, but this has been the site of a major environmental justice battle against an incinerator. And now that that incinerator is gone, the community has an opportunity to envisage a completely different waste management system. Because of the incinerator, for many years, there was virtually no composting or recycling in Detroit. And our calculations show that this transformation of Detroit into a zero waste program would reduce emissions 102%. So again, basically getting us to carbon neutrality in the waste sector, and even a little bit beyond. So that's the mitigation side, but there's also an adaptation angle here. We don't often think about waste as an adaptation strategy, but there are several important connections. I'm just going to talk about one, which is flooding. Climate change is already exacerbating flooding and drought, as we can see with Hurricane Ian, the floods in Pakistan, and a simultaneous drought in much of the Western US and several other parts of the world. And a major contributor to urban flooding is plastic, which blocks drainage. So bans on single-use plastic and plastic bags are really cost-effective tools that cities can use to reduce flooding. At the same time, compost, again, compost, is great at improving the soil's ability to hold water. So this is something that Sao Paulo is really working on. Because Sao Paulo has been hit with a multi-year drought, and Victor can talk more about this. Our partner, the program there, Polis, has started a program that will bring source-separated organic waste to compost sites on the city's periphery. The compost improves the soil quality, allowing it to absorb and retain water, which both provides a greenbelt buffer around the city to reduce flooding and allows it to sustain agriculture even in drought times. And then the food from these farms is brought back to the city to improve food security and food access. So there's mitigation, there's adaptation, and then there's other benefits, which is kind of a catchphrase for a whole lot of different issues. We sometimes get stuck on the numbers as climate activists, especially those of us focused on mitigation. But as important as those reductions are, there's a larger system at work here. And what we have found repeatedly is that support for climate action is dependent on leveraging these co-benefits, right? So the co-benefits are very important because they build political support. And I just want to talk about one in particular. There are many that we touch on in the report, but there's one in particular, which is job creation. Last year, we released a study that showed the job creation potential of zero waste systems. They create 10 to 60 times as many jobs as disposal-based systems like landfills and incinerators. So for all of us who are thinking about employment as an important deliverable, and for cities who are looking for that kind of economic development, zero waste is an important resource to look at. So waste is going to be a very hot topic over this next year. We already have more than 550 cities worldwide that are starting to implement zero waste programs. There's a huge focus on reducing methane emissions. We have the Global Methane Hub and the Global Methane Pledge. And coming up this year's climate COP, the Egyptian government is going to be launching its 50 by 2050 initiative, which is an initiative to get African countries to pledge to reduce waste going to landfill 50% by 2050. So we're already seeing a lot of interest in implementation of zero waste. And I just want to put in a little plug that we're going to have a zero waste hub at the climate COP. So if you are going to be in Egypt, please come by and visit us. So to sum it up, organic waste and plastic are big carbon emitters. And so reducing those is a priority. Zero waste strategies are fast, they're cost effective, and they reduce emissions. They also create jobs, strengthen soils, improve climate resilience, and much, much more. So thank you for your attention. I want to encourage you to download the report from our website. And I am going to hand it back over to our moderator, Neydi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil, and thank GAIA for developing this report and for giving us data and information about this crucial topic. So once again, for all our participants, please put your questions in the Q&A box and tell us where are you from, where are you joining from, and for all listening in the live stream in Facebook, also please give us your comments here. We have over 150 participants joining today for this discussion. So I would very much like to invite our panelists today to open their cameras. We have US Congresswoman Rashida, welcome again. State Representative Abraham, welcome again. And of course, Judith and Victor Argentino, or Argentino, I don't know how to pronounce it in Portuguese. So please, before we start with individual questions, let me raise one question for all of you, where you can share with us your thoughts in a quick response about the importance of this topic. I mean, there's an urgency around, and well, some people is, but nobody's questioning this urgency. Now, how do you see this information contained in this report being launched today, supporting your work towards cooling the climate and zero waste? You are representing different arenas from the governmental and the societal arenas. So let me give you the floor to you, US Congresswoman Rashida. Welcome, and tell us in a brief sentence, if it's possible, how does this report support your work?
You know, I think it's really important for all of you to know, yes, I'm a United States Congresswoman and I have that title, but what reports like this do is give credibility to the work that we're doing policy-wise. Some of the requests and letters that we send to the White House, and having them think about this with more urgency, or acting with more urgency. But I know the personal stories and testimonies of so many of my residents have been so incredibly powerful tools to change, again, the conversation, but again, also helping push people to move with more urgency. But we all know that data is incredibly important, and we need engaging and creative ways of making our case to all kinds of policymakers, many of which might not be moved from the personal stories, but want to actually see the data. And so I know, for some folks, telling them that zero waste could save equivalent of 300 million cars emissions, it clicks for them right away. And so we are now able to use much of the data in the report as part of the tools in trying to have that meaningful change. So it's incredibly important.
Thank you. Thank you, yes, Congresswoman. And let me give you the floor, Judith, please. And for our participants today, I'm sorry, we have been providing you on the chat box the information about our panelists today, so we don't have to go and read it again because it will take us a whole hour. So Judith, welcome.
Thank you.
Please share with us your thinking.
Yeah, it's an honor to be with you. Let me start by saying I love GAIA reports. They are factual, they are timely. I gobble them up more than novels. And this is a really good one. And this is going to change the debate. And thinking about today, I went into my closet and I pulled out this old t-shirt that says, if you're not for zero waste, how much are you for? And I've had this t-shirt for a really long time. I'm a fashionista. I wear environmental t-shirts rather than elegant attire. And I love this question. If you're not for zero waste, how much are you for? And if you're for 50% waste, are you willing to live next to the garbage incinerator or the landfill? And what this report does is remind us of the enormous environmental justice implications related to waste issues. I spend my life working to reduce plastic pollution. And it's because plastics are generated at petrochemical facilities in low-income communities of color, mostly in Appalachia, Texas, Louisiana. And then if you don't recycle the plastic, which most of it doesn't, and Beyond Plastics did a report last year documenting plastic recycling was only 5 to 6%, which is abysmal compared to other materials. So if you don't recycle or reduce the plastic, then it goes to a landfill or incinerator. What this report does is remind us that plastics is a climate change issue. Beyond Plastics issued a report last year that's resulted in the phrase plastics is the new coal, because it is. We looked at the 10 distinct ways that greenhouse gases are released with the production, use, and disposal of plastics. And the amount is equivalent to 116 average size coal-fired power plants. So that means by 2030, we'll have more greenhouse gas emissions from plastic production, use, and disposal than from burning coal. So I want to stay within the timeframes. I could talk about GAIA reports forever, but the climate connection is the real takeaway for me, and also not to listen to the false solutions being promoted by the plastics industry that we can burn plastic as a solution. They don't call it burning, they call it chemical recycling or advanced recycling. They change the name every year or so, but it's essentially burning plastics to create low-grade fossil fuel. That is not a solution.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that reminder, and thank you for the reminder about fashion. Local is always better. And welcome, State Representative Abraham Aiyash. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it well.
No, that's okay. It's Aiyash, like, oh my gosh.
Aiyash. Thank you very much for that. And so, how do you see this information contained in the report supporting your work towards cooling the climate zero waste?
So I think it's incredibly important to recognize that oftentimes we put the burden on the consumer, and we talk about the move to zero waste without acknowledging that the way things are manufactured and produced, almost 80% of that stuff can be prevented if we do that. And I'll give you a quick example. I was staying at a hotel, I was visiting another part of the state to campaign for another colleague. And I walked into the hotel and there were 5 disposable paper cups, but each cup was individually wrapped in plastic. And this is something in the United States, as someone who's traveled abroad, you know, having been to Egypt, having been to Turkey, to Saudi Arabia, to even other parts of Asia, I can tell you that there's an obsession with sort of putting things in plastic. There's a famous fried chicken place in the Middle East called Bake, Al Bake, and they will literally put every single condiment and every single item within a plastic bag. So you'll get your garlic sauce in a plastic bag, you'll get your chicken placed in a plastic bag, the forks placed in a plastic bag, and then all of those plastic bags are placed in a larger plastic bag. So we have to, I think, look at this from a beginning of life production issue and say, how can we ensure that the end of life production or the end of life of the product is considered when you are producing it to begin with. And it's especially critical because poor communities, you know, they don't have the luxury of deciding whether or not they will purchase something that has a compostable packaging or recyclable packaging. For them, it's, I have an immediate need to feed my family, to make sure I have water, to ensure that I have the resources and the very things I need to live. The thought of whether or not I'm going to prioritize the compostability or the production or the sustainability of the product is less important when I'm more concerned about making sure I get my medication, food, and water. And it's especially critical in Detroit. And I think the incinerator shutting down, though, was a clear example. You know, I grew up walking to school every single morning. And as soon as we walk by the freeway, it was just customary to put your shirt over your nose because of that sulfuric smell. We thought that was normal. Come to find out, as you get older, these are the things that are not supposed to be normal, and it's not something that anyone would want for. So shout out to all of the organizers that fought for years to finally shut it down. And you know, there may be an opportunity that we build a recycling center at that old site as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I live in one of the most polluted cities here in Mexico City, and we have to do the same, and it gets normal, and it's not fine, definitely. And yes, thank you very much for your comment, State Representative. And please, let me give you the floor, Victor. Again, how is this report supporting your work?
Well, for us here in Brazil, it's an incredibly important report, especially the data, the key data that you provided us, because we had a discussion here, especially in Brazil, as we have around 30% of our waste going to dumps, and there was a discussion even in the climate network that increasing sanitation in Brazil would lead to higher emission in waste sector. And the report gives us like scientifically based information that increasing sanitation, better services in this area through zero waste strategies and not through conventional strategies, linear strategies from waste to energy incineration, from landfilling and substituting dumps to landfills or incinerators, as some places normally broadcast for us as the good solutions. This will not lead to higher emissions and will not overburden climate as we thought. So this is a good one, good learning for us to advocate even more in zero waste strategies as a solution, not only to a better waste management here in Brazil, but also that this is the only way that we will increase the waste sanitation services, better sanitation service to the people, especially the poor, not overburdening climate change, and also not overburden the pocket of the people, as we know, and as the report also states that this conventional so other solutions, they increase the costs of waste management services that we are passing here in Brazil, a really complex discussion to how finance the systems. And this solution, not only a climate solution, it shows that if we focus and in two waste streams that they are the major waste streams here in Brazil, half of our waste is organic in most cities, and the other major composition of the waste are plastics. So if we focus plastics and organics through zero waste strategies, we can have an even cheaper system and solve the climate change problem that we have here.
Thank you, Victor. And the reality, if you all agree with me, is that the population worldwide still is growing, right? It keeps growing. And so this report is reminding us as well that we are increasing. So this is something where we have to act. Let me share with you very briefly. And this is also a health issue. And I'm representing an organization, for example, working within the intersection of health and climate. And this is very important. I mean, zero waste is also a goal to protect health, human health, and the Earth's health. So yes, we don't want to promote incineration, and we want a toxics-free future. We want to protect the workers, and we want the polluter to pay. So let's start by each of you have already shared a bit of your background and personal interests and specific learnings from this report. Neil was presenting about all three aspects. This is about mitigation. This is about adaptation. You've all said it as well. This is also about climate justice and environmental justice and about social issues. This is about our common future. So let me ask you very specific things. Also, if you can share with the audience your interest. And thank you very much for all the participants who are already sending very good questions. It will be hard to go through all of them. We will try to compile them. So, U.S. Congresswoman Rashida, in your experience, both as an activist, but also as a legislator, how do we take zero waste climate action from the city level to the national level? Because this is a both levels participation. So please, you have the floor.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note, I grew up in Detroit, which I consider the most beautiful, blackest city in the United States. And one of the things I've been taught as a community organizer and advocate, and I know Senator Representative Aiyash agrees in that we've never seen meaningful change around civil rights, which is continuing to be a fight in our country, but also, to be able to right to organize unions, all that. It didn't come with who was elected to Congress or who was in the White House, who was the president of the United States at that time. It really came about because folks organized on the ground in the streets. And Grace Lee Boggs, an amazing advocate, and left a lot of her writings, talks about this all the time, is that, again, transformative and meaningful change really happens when the consciousness on the ground is working to uplift, injustices and pushing for real meaningful change. And so I want to push folks to know that for us to even get on the federal level with a number of things that I've seen around housing, around issues regarding education, I always notice the benefit and the force and the power of being able to organize at the local level. For me, much of the local wins can actually be even easier to be able to help, save lives around issues like this. Residents can connect, I think, even more at the local level, at their council level, various commissions, or whatever local elected level of government there is. But, for much of the work that I've seen, I see Rep. Aiyash introducing things at the local level around water, around other issues that I'm elevating at the national level. But even at the local level, you can see more engagement because they can feel like, okay, I can go to that council meeting, I can go to that hearing in the state house and so forth. So I think it's really important to recognize I don't think the critical movement on the ground before you can actually get to, and you can do both, of course. But I find that much of the things I'm working on now came from the district coalitions and folks on the ground working on this issue. We've made the issue around water as a human right act at the national level because of the work that was done at the local level. These water warriors in Detroit talked about how, low-income communities were not only getting their water shut off, but even those that were paying for the water, it was poisoned water. It had not only lead, but plastics, PFAS, everything. Reports are coming out talking about that. And again, much of the work we're doing on the federal level is because it's stemming from the local level. And I know Rep. Aiyash is working on affordability, so am I on the national level, but I tell you, the local coalitions on the ground are the ones translating it and getting it to the national level. And again, don't underestimate that transformative change can happen at the local level, reaching.
And thank you. You are just reminding us of the importance to act and to be bold. So yeah, let's organize ourselves and let's do it. Thank you for that reminder. State Representative Abraham Aiyash, could you share more about, you have already started telling this story about your community, but could you share more about your work with the community to shut down this incinerator and drive zero waste strategies? I see your camera's off. I'm not sure if maybe he took a...
No, okay. I'm sorry. That was a technical glitch.
It's okay. I was just not sure. So please, could you share more about this story? I mean, how does zero waste build more thriving and equitable community?
So, I mean, we recognized many years ago, so the fight against the incinerator that was in Detroit was one that was deep pain and deep frustration. And the reason why was this: we have more pollution sites or places that process toxic waste and emissions in that specific part in the city of Detroit than anywhere else in the state of Michigan. And just in the facility within a 1.5 mile radius, you have junkyards, you have places that process radioactive waste, places that process solid waste, and this incinerator that was burning Canadian garbage with the guise of saying we are creating clean energy in the name of steam energy. It was just something that folks said, we are sick and tired of this happening. We are not seeing any benefit. We are in fact seeing more impact and harm to our public health, to our personal health, to our communities. And anytime you see some of these facilities, they open up and they exploit what these poor communities are going through by saying, hey, you guys really need some parks. We're going to go ahead and fund some money to be able to open up some parks, or hey, we'll provide a roof repair program, or give you filters, or give you new windows, as a way to put a cover on the actual crisis at hand, where they are literally poisoning our community. So this was a decades-long battle. And to say that I'm someone who sort of led that initiative would be a disservice to those that fought for this every single day. Breathe Free Detroit, Detroit Grassroots, these are two organizations that sort of stepped up and said, we need to push back against this. And they, to Congresswoman Tlaib's point, pushed every single lever they could, going to their local government, going to the city council, pushing and putting pressure on the mayor to move in the right direction, advancing this effort with the EPA and the federal delegation, as well as fighting this on the state level with our environmental regulators here on the state level. And it was a long, drawn-out fight. But the reality is that we don't know if that was ever going to shut down had there not been a conversation with our community members pushing this on the local level. And these folks fought when no one was looking at this community. This was a place, a little bit of historical background, that area of Detroit is the section that underwent the riots back in '67. So you saw a lot of divestment after the bankruptcy within the city of Detroit in the mid 2000s. So this was a space that didn't see a lot of love or interest in terms of, does this place make sense for us to invest in, to focus on? But the community members fought. But then it speaks to a broader issue in Michigan. We have some of the lowest recycling rates in the country. Michigan and Detroit is even lower what the state average is. Michigan has a 15% recycling rate compared to the national average of 35, which is still not good. And Michigan also has one of the lowest tipping fees. And for those of you that don't know what the tipping fee is, it's the cost it takes to literally tip garbage into a landfill. Yeah. We pay 36 cents a ton. For reference, the national average is $5.30 a ton. So you have a situation where Canada, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, our neighboring states, are literally trucking in garbage and dumping it in Michigan because of how cheap it is for them to do that. So there was no incentive to actually address this issue. And these were all state laws that we needed to change. Now, we worked on a massive law change to change what our solid waste laws here in Michigan to incentivize recycling. The problem is the waste lobby, or I call them the garbage lobby. They worked very, very hard to keep the tipping fee as low as they can, because it made sense for these garbage companies and these trucking companies to keep it very, very low. So while we made reforms and we passed it out of the House, it's sitting in committee in Senate where it will sitting in the Senate in committee where it will likely die this session. And if you follow the money, the chair of that committee has received tens of thousands of dollars in contributions from owners of landfills here in the state of Michigan. Mm-hmm. So it is extremely disgusting to see that we have people in the legislature who were elected and sworn to protect and serve this country, this state, and uphold the Constitution, which, by the way, people don't realize the Michigan State Constitution was written at a time where there was a higher emphasis and a higher degree on protecting our natural resources and our planet. Violating that oath by putting the interests of these donors at the expense of the health of our community. So, like I said, it costs $5 less than the national average to drop your garbage off in Michigan, which leads to things like organic waste being dumped all into our state, and it's causing this issue, right? It's why Canada thought and saw the incentive of bringing in their trash across the bridge to be able to burn it here in our backyards and poisoning our seniors and our families.
And I get the feeling, we have a very similar situation here, which is not right. And I want to share that people from Costa Rica, Chile, and the USA, they're greeting. So I'm very happy to know they are joining us today. Thank you very much for that. And it's about acting. It's about putting our hands into action. But you've said something very important. It's about doing it with information and with the right of speaking out and raise our voice, knowing that there's data and there's information that we have to share. So thank you very much for that. Let me go to you back, Judith. You have already spoken about plastics. I mean, you're a founder of Beyond Plastics, but around the world, people are waking up, yes, to this crisis of plastic pollution as a climate, as a health issue, even as a fashion thing. We've all seen these pictures of the turtles and the straws. But what about the plastics industry that is now promoting plastic burning, aka chemical recycling, as a way out? You just said it, but is it a viable zero waste option? Can you share more about it, please? And I want to thank again to all the people that are putting their comments. There are some comments about it, Judith. There's a lot of interest. So please share with us your experience and your knowledge.
Well, chemical recycling or advanced recycling or whatever misleading name you call it is essentially plastic burning, and it is not a viable zero waste strategy. GAIA has another report. See, I told you I love GAIA reports. They have other reports pointing out the problems. NRDC has a very good report that also documented the small number of plastic burning facilities in the United States are almost all located in low-income environmental justice communities. And that's the thread we're hearing today, whether it's a giant mass burn garbage incinerator around the world or a chemical recycling facility. It's always low-income communities of color that their communities are becoming sacrifice zones. And this absolutely has to change. So the thing about chemical recycling that I also want to point out is it doesn't work. It takes, plastics are so heterogeneous, polystyrene, plastic bags, all different chemical additives, all different plasticizers. You can't just mix them all together and create new plastic. That might work inside a laboratory, but it doesn't work in real life. Any chemist will confirm that. So these companies also seek large taxpayer subsidies. And if they don't get the public subsidies, they will not be built. What folks need to keep an eye on is two things. One is standalone incentives to promote chemical recycling. The American Chemistry Council has passed new laws in 20 states throughout the United States promoting chemical recycling. Reports are they might get a similar bill introduced at the federal level, which we will have to vigorously oppose. The other thing that I've been worried about for a few years is grassroots activists around the world have raised public awareness about the problems with plastic. And now we're seeing bills proposed dealing with extended producer responsibility, EPR. Terrible name, good goal, drive down packaging, make polluters pay for packaging. But what's happened is the plastic industry has hijacked EPR proposals to make sure that they're very weak, that they don't actually require reductions for plastics. Recycling is not a solution. And they also often promote chemical recycling. So while I completely agree that the power is at the grassroots level, when the people lead, the leaders will follow. We've got to do that hard organizing work, which doesn't happen on Twitter. It happens knocking on doors and providing daycare at community meetings and really engaging with the public. But at the same time, we can't take our eye off of what state and federal lawmakers are doing. Because if you get weak EPR bills through, or you get another law on the books promoting chemical recycling with either taxpayer subsidy or deregulating these facilities, which is what we're seeing from state level environmental laws, it's really going to be hard to get the zero waste solutions to really take off because they need money. And I also think the zero waste solution projects should be eligible for economic development funds because as this report lays out, this is far more job creating than burying and burning.
Thank you. And this week there's this green growth forum, right? And there's a lot about the green finance now. And so thank you for reminding us about the importance of having finance incentives. There's people still today that find more appealing information from the finance side rather than the human health, the planet's health, and their existence itself. Thank you very much for that, Judith, and for all your information. Victor, let me go back to you, because you have a lot of experience as well working with the vulnerable populations. And so thinking of this, of the most vulnerable people who are also leading the solutions, we've talked about the fees, the tips that representative was talking about as well. How do advocates and policymakers integrate with waste pickers, farmers? I mean, how to integrate children and the rest of the people, the impacted communities, in the shift to zero waste?
Well, we here believe that this integration, it's not only necessary, but here, especially in talking about Brazil, and as far as we know from others global South cities, if you don't integrate vulnerable people, these vulnerable groups in the system, it will not work. we have like speeches like that, policies that works and don't work. Normally it comes from that. If you think a policy in the office, it will not work on ground probably. So you should talk to people that really works on ground. And here in Brazil, the informal recycling system from city to cities, it changes, but it varies from 3 to 10-fold times more than the formal collection system. So if you don't integrate waste pickers in this waste management systems, it will not work. So zero waste strategy shows that the only way to go further and to reduce landfilling and reducing incineration is only to integration of waste pickers, and especially organic waste management give us an opportunity to integrate farmers. We have some cities here in Brazil that don't have waste pickers groups organized, and the cities are starting to work with farmers, especially here because in Brazil, we import around 85% of our fertilizers. And the recent war and the COVID pandemic showed us how our food prices has risen as we depend so much in the importation of fertilizers, and it can build our sovereignty in fertilizers too, especially to local and little farmers and peasants, as the biggest one doesn't suffer like that. So it's a really good strategy here that we should focus and give and pay attention to work, especially because as we have seen here that the cities that works with this integration have even the public costs are lower than the ones that just give the money to the private sector to do something that it's not even good for the city. So this integration it's quite the key to have a good waste management solution. If you don't do it, basically we'll keep going in linear solutions and don't have the community engagement necessary to do the most important process like separate collection, composting, plastic bans. This is the most important things for us.
Mm-hmm. And you made me think also about our personal commitment, because we have talked here a lot about the policy engagement and the industries, but what about our personal changes? So how are we committing to recycle our clothes and to recycle and to avoid, right? It's not only about recycling, it's about, as a starter, not to accept things as they come grabbed or whatever. When the US representative Abraham was talking about how much plastic we receive, once I heard, let's face it, we are addicted. We are all addicts to plastics, and we are all addicts to coal. That's terrible. And so let's be bold. Let's be bold, and then let's now. I'm a mom, and I know how important it is also to pass this information to my daughter. We're about to end this conversation because we are already 8 minutes to be at the top of the hour. There are a lot of questions, and thank you for all of you. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Victor. And thank to all of you who have been already answered some of these questions online. Thank you to the people who are sharing their thoughts, their concerns, and their ideas from all over the world. Let's have a final round of interventions. Let me try to put together, and thank you to the GAIA's team as well, who's helping here. There are a lot of information and questions about the recycling. And so can we go there very quickly? Can we share all together from our own position how to move forward, right? How to put this report and this information into action, how to prevent toxic, low-paying plastic sorting jobs from being labeled, for example, as zero waste or green jobs. We don't want greenwashing, right? Can we do a final round where you can share with us your thoughts about this? What are the main composting challenges in developing countries, for example? It's not the same to talk about what's done in Switzerland and what is done, for example, in specific communities in South America or other regions. So let me give you the floor for a final comment, and maybe you can wrap up a bit of the questions. And thank you very much once again. I'll start with you, Neil.
So I would say, I think the most important step is composting. And to do that, what we really need is good source separation behavior. This goes a little bit in the weeds, but seeing the questions, I think people are interested in this. People have tried to do composting using mixed waste, and it doesn't work because it's too contaminated. No farmer wants that on their lands. So it's really all about good source separation behavior. And here we have a cultural problem. Not of the people, not the consumers. They're perfectly willing to source separate. The cultural problem is the waste engineers, the people who run waste management departments who believe in machinery. We're going to build a machine to separate the waste. They don't want to put their trust in people. And the message I have is build a simple system, like a 3-bin system that's color-coded, and then invest some money and some effort in public communication. You put it on billboards, you put it on the sides of buses, you have an educational unit in the schools so the children know how to source separate, and you will see very, very good compliance rates. I tell a story. I used to live in San Francisco, and every 3 to 6 months, I would get a flyer in 4 languages, because in my neighborhood, if you wanted to communicate with people, you had to do it in English, Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese. And everybody, we couldn't talk to each other, many of the neighbors, we didn't have each share a language, but everybody separated their compost. It really was not that difficult. We need to get the waste departments to put a little bit of faith in people that they actually will comply. And once you do that, you're reducing your methane emissions, you're generating this beneficial soil amendment, and then you're off to the races, really.
It's like unlearning, right? Or letting go what we've learned, forget it, and redo it again. Thank you very much, Neil. State Representative Abraham Aiyash, please share your thoughts as a final comment.
Yeah, I can tell you what we're doing locally. So some of those solid waste reforms was sometimes you have to force the market to move in a way to protect this planet. And the legislation that we introduced and passed out of the House would force local communities by 2024 of 20,000 or more residents to offer curbside recycling. That's the first thing. Second thing, under 20,000, you would have to provide a drop-off site for folks to come by. And I think folks just need an education to sort of understand the power of composting and not throwing organic material away. To give you just a quick example, we just passed, and I was deeply, deeply opposed to this legislation, but it was a nearly $1 billion corporate welfare package. And in that welfare package was $100 million for a landfill to be developed into mixed use housing. And the thing is, it's like, Why did we allow such a large swath of land to be used as a landfill? And now we are spending $100 million to fix that property up to ensure that it can be developed safely. It's just disgusting. And we will continue to see this wasted investment. And, you know, in Michigan, we have to try to frame it from an economic perspective that it is actually a smarter economic move to move towards zero waste and to move towards disposing of our organic material through composting than through just tossing things in a landfill, because we only have about 30 years left to do that. And I know folks think 30 years is a long time, but it's not. You know, the Backstreet Boys are less than 30 years old. And I think folks got to understand that this is where we're at. And I'll close with this final point as it relates to figuring out ways to deal with plastic. We need to hold our producers accountable, number one, but more importantly, we have the data, and the data is important. And I'm so glad that GAIA has released this report, but do not forget the power of story. You know, it was the power of story that moved the Detroit incinerator to finally shut down. So I always like to use the word anecdata. It's the power of story and anecdotes and data, and merging that into sharing a story that is deeply rooted to the numbers. And I'll use a quick example. You know, if I give you the probability of you getting struck by lightning, you'll probably be comfortable with the number because of how low risk it is. But if you have a friend who told you, I know someone who was struck by lightning, it doesn't matter how much data I give you of the probability of that lightning strike not hitting you, you are going to be afraid of getting struck by lightning because you know a story of someone who was struck by lightning. And that's the power of narrative. And I say, keep that at the forefront of everything you do as you organize. And hopefully we have compassionate leadership in local and state government where a lot of these issues come to light. Local governments are the ones that deal with landfills and make those decisions. Hopefully they will have a change of heart and recognize the impetus that it's not a matter of we're running out of time, it's that we are too late. And the longer we wait, the worse it gets. But we are already late, and it's just a matter of keeping up with the damage that is already being caused as we speak.
It's a fact of urgency. And thank you for reminding us. This is also about changing the market. This is a market transformation issue. This is the power of consumers that sometimes we forget, right? Thank you very much for that. And please, you as Congresswoman Rashida, you have the floor.
No, thank you. I know many, probably Judith is fully aware, but there is a Senate bill that I think is something that can be used as an organizing tool to educate folks, but Senate Bill 984, which is Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. And specifically the bill pushes to reduce the production and use of certain single-use plastic products, packaging, put the responsibility onto producers that are designing, those that are collecting, reusing, recycling, and disposing of that. And so much of it is surrounding around packaging from entering into animal and human food chains as well as waterways. And it's something that, again, we could be fighting really hard to work around as a pathway. And I gotta tell you, we have to incentivize this. It's almost like we have to fund it, and there will come folks who will be able to push through that. I see that now with some of the other false solutions, unfortunately, but we got to go focus on some real solutions. But again, I think the federal government or all levels of government can try to incentivize it and move people quicker.
Thank you very much. And you are already responding to one of our audience questions. What can we do as citizens? Raise our voice, use our vote, right? Share this information, share what we're learning from today's session. So thank you very much. Yes.
Can I quickly add to that, Neydi? So to the question of what can citizens do, there is a concerted, organized, expensive lobby that is in the chemical industry who promotes chemical recycling, that is worth landfills, and so many other organizations that profit and benefit, and corporations that profit and benefit off the system. A lot of your local elected officials have no clue about some of these things. And I can tell you, I'm teaching my colleagues about composting. Some of them have no idea how it works or what the benefit of changing the end product lifestyle, the end product life and things of that nature. Don't assume that your elected officials understand these things. Go in and teach them. And you would be surprised at how much money is used to show them the other science and the data. And we got to fight that, right? I think that's a huge factor. And then the other thing I just want to emphasize, I'd be remiss if I did not talk about the other structural issues that lead poor communities to consume things with higher levels of plastic and also dispose more organic waste. You know, in Detroit, we have many food deserts. So people buy in bulk some of the food items, and then they end up throwing it away because they could not consume it in the time that it lasted. That's the first issue. And the second issue is, you know, we use all of these right here. And I hate that I have this in my office, but we have these because Detroit lead service lines all across the metro area where we live. We have fresh water. Let's not make a mistake. We have great water. We have terrible systems that run the water. So people resort to this because of mistrust in the system, and they end up drinking plastic bottled water and tossing it because we don't have expensive recycling programs because of that. And I think that's something that we also have to think about as we begin the conversation about making sure that we're not greenwashing things and that we recognize that there's a deeper structural issue that relates to these issues. Sorry for taking up more time.
No. I feel like we all want to stay here for another hour. It's almost impossible to go through all the questions. And I mean, it's like 1 million pieces of the puzzle. And if you allow me, yes, this is a very bad situation, but I think the report is showing us, and you all are here telling us how to make the change, because we don't want to share the message that, oh, this is so bad, so let's just all climb to the metro. And we don't want to promote suicide here. What we want to promote is action. What we want to promote is commitment. So thank you very much for going back and providing these examples. Judith, perhaps you can help us also with your final comment to address some of all these interesting questions about the plastics and in the industry and etc. So Judith, you have the floor.
So on the issue of lead service lines, it's great that there's finally federal dollars to replace them, but I would recommend that we not replace them with plastic pipes because we might be right back in the same problem in about 20 or 25 years. And so there's a group of us that are pushing recycled copper as the replacement for PVC pipes and other plastic pipes. I appreciate the Congresswoman raising the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. It's a really important federal bill. A key component is the bottle bill, mandatory deposits on beverage containers. I know that's in place in Michigan and 9 other states, but there are 40 states that don't have bottle bills because of the opposition from mom and pop companies like Coke and Pepsi. So we need to work on a national bottle bill. We need to get the 40 other states, and with provisions that promote refill and reuse, not just recycling, because plastic recycling is not the solution to the plastics crisis. Third, we need strong extended producer responsibility policies, EPR. There are 4 state laws on the books in the United States. I've read all 4 of them. They're all pretty weak. We need a strong law that actually requires reductions in packaging. So Beyond Plastics has a fact sheet, 10 requirements for effective EPR, which I shared with GAIA. And I'll be in touch with our representative from Michigan to see if we could get strong EPR introduced in Michigan. We've got it introduced in a couple states, and prevent the chemical industry from hijacking the concept of extended producer responsibility. Just like we have fuel efficiency standards for cars, we need environmental standards for packaging. And my first priority is reduction, reuse, refill. Second, get toxics out of packaging. And third, don't put the packaging industry in charge. We wouldn't expect the tobacco industry to be in charge of anti-smoking. We shouldn't have these packaging producer responsibility organizations calling the shots. And then my final point is about democracy and the need to listen to people who don't have paid lobbyists. I have been noticing an erosion in terms of opportunities for public input. I go to many public hearings and you're told, how do you solve climate change? Please tell me, Judith Enck, in 2 minutes. It's impossible. We can't just have these pro forma public hearings where everyone has 2 minutes. So getting elected officials and regulatory agencies to really invest in legitimate opportunities for public input, because the public has a lot of good ideas. They are not, they're not paid lobbyists. They have lived experiences. So whether it's roundtables, whether it's having open houses, just giving people a voice so the decision-making is not dominated by the fossil fuel industry and the chemical industry, because they've kind of screwed it up, and they're not going to get us to solutions that protect health.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. Thank you very much. Victor, final comment from you, and maybe you're able as well to address a bit of the questions from the audience. We are already delayed, so let me just take 5 minutes more from all of your time.
Okay.
But you can respond in 3, 2.
Yeah, two is good. We tried 2 minutes before. So I think adding to, I agree with all that was spoke before, and add that with zero waste strategies, we create fair jobs, that especially in formalizing informal sector in Global South, it's quite important to give fair jobs and raising income, create more jobs. In composting, we generated 3.5 more jobs than landfilling, and dumping even more, and also incineration, with recycling even more, remanufacturing. So we needed this. We talk a lot of just transition. So zero waste maybe is the best just transition strategy that we have, that we reduce it, create fair jobs, and generate more jobs. So I think that we have to make this political shift and to claim our cities. Here in São Paulo, we have with Zero Waste Brazilian Alliance and the São Paulo Compost and Cultivate campaign to promote the change in the city and also in Brazil, because we have like public money investment, as the representative Abraham said, and Rashida, investing in the wrong solutions. We need to redirect it to the good solutions. We have in Brazil a lot of money to public contractations of landfilling. Now we have really big incentives to electricity production, to incineration, like 10 times, 5 times more than to solar. We have a huge incentive to synthetic fertilizers, and we don't have incentives to compost. So we need this political pressure to shift these incentives to the good solution. And answering the questions briefly, I believe that we have a really potential to improve organic waste recycling, to reinforcing the waste pickers worker that we have in most cities in Brazil, and they are underfunded only with dry recyclables normally. If you invest basically and mostly in the capex cost of the composting unit construction, and pay then contract then as you contract a common company to do the organic waste separate collection, they will do better than a company, because has more contact to people than a common company that wants to get your trash out. You speak with the waste pickers, you have more connection, you will separate it better. So we believe that it has a huge opportunity. We are finishing now a study here in Brazil that mapped the experiences that underfunded, they are doing this exactly.
Yeah, you're right. So thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. Thank you, GAIA, for, again, doing this work. Please, to the audience, remember to separate your waste. Please remember to do the compost. Let's educate. Let's enlighten people. Let's share our knowledge. Let's promote, incentivize financial and whatever incentivize you need. Let's use your power as consumers. Use the policy, show the case, transform the market, act, be bold, use your voice. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us today. Greetings to Brazil, Michigan, Detroit. I don't know where you're based, Neil, to all of our colleagues all over the continent who were with us today. Please keep tuned with the report. You can go to GAIA's website. You can go to all of our partners also website. Again, this recording is going to be later. Thank you for organizing this. Thank you for your time, and let's be in touch.